Hi, I'm Lisa Wood. I'm the editor-in-chief of Microgrid Knowledge. I'm here at Microgrid 2019 in San Diego with Juan Macias, and he is the CEO of AlphaStruxure, a new company we'll be talking about. And we're also here with Mark Feasal, and Mark is the director of Smart Grid for Schneider Electric. So let's start with you, Juan. I want to talk to you a little bit about this new company that's been formed, AlphaStruxure. Tell me about why it was formed and what it's all about.
Well, first of all, Lisa, thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be here at the conference, and I look forward to engaging with everyone. And we're very excited to talk about AlphaStruxure. So AlphaStruxure is a company that we just formed, a joint venture between Schneider Electric and the Carlyle Group, specifically in Carlyle, the Carlyle Global Infrastructure Fund. And this fund, or this joint venture, has two purposes. So one purpose is to be the technology partner to the Carlyle Global Infrastructure Fund, which is focused at developing infrastructure here in the U.S. Right? I think all of your listeners and and all of us as individuals know that the need that we have in the U.S. and around the world to really modernize our infrastructure. So the Carlyle Group is focused on developing some large projects in the U.S., such as the JFK Terminal 1 project, such as the Lone Star Port, which would be the largest crude oil export port in Corpus Christi, Texas. And we're very excited to be working with them there as their technology partner. Another part of our joint venture is the development and acceleration of energy as a service. So we started working with Carlyle a couple of years back with Dynamic Energy Networks, which was another company that they backed. And now we take that effort, we incorporate it into AlphaStruxure, and we do that so that we can accelerate the growth of energy as a service and bring the capabilities of both companies into AlphaStruxure to do that, both the technology, the financial capabilities that Carlyle has. So we're very excited to be here at the conference, to be here with Schneider Electric and the Carlyle team, and to be working together to accelerate this energy transition together.
So, Mark, let's talk to you for a minute. Mark, you've been working on a lot of transportation projects. We've talked about a few of them. Tell me what is the relationship between transportation and microgrids?
Sure, yeah, and just to maybe even expand a little bit and build on what Juan said, because clearly you're talking about two ports, an airport and a seaport, and we see that as part of the transportation segment. So a lot of times you might want to jump right to electric vehicle, but we see it as encompassing all those things. Energy as a service is a story of energy that is smartly acquired, locally produced, and efficiently consumed. And as we unpack each of those things, you can begin to think of how it might impact the transportation segment. So first of all, it might mean locally generated. Generating electricity locally allows you to be very prescriptive on the sustainability and resilience that are right for you, right? You might be able to get that off the grid, but you might not. Augmenting the grid with what you can do on site gives you a lot of optionality around that. If you couple that with efficiently consuming it, so consuming when maybe price from the grid is lower cost, could be a great advantage. For example, an electric vehicle. You can imagine that people are driving all day, they come home, they plug their vehicles in, and what time is that? Probably 6 or 7 p.m. Solar is starting to be waning off at that period. Guess when grid prices are likely to be a little bit higher? Probably right in that period, potentially in the future, right, in some areas. So putting a microgrid allows you to create some flexibility around when exactly you're buying that energy. Perhaps we'd augment that with some stationary storage to go and provide some of that shoulder, it's called a shoulder period of energy price during that period. And then finally, smartly acquired. So there's always going to be some amount of energy, there often is, that it makes sense to acquire from the grid. And not just physical energy, but also maybe sustainability, contractual energy, virtual purchase power agreements, etc. If you're operating a fleet and you're starting to change from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles, you may not want to go and repower all those batteries with fossil fuels from the grid, right? So it might make sense to figure out a way to procure some of that greener energy from your utility, or if you're an open market, from other actors in the market that can provide some of that to you via contractual agreement. So we really see all three of those elements, whether it's local production, efficient consumption, smart acquisition, as being key parts of what the transportation segment is going to need.
So are there particular kinds of facilities that would really benefit? You mentioned ports and you mentioned airports, and they're pretty obvious. Are there others? Are there any, say, at the end of a line of production or anything along those lines?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, clearly there's weak spots in our grid today, right? There's parts of the grid that, don't have as much backup as other parts. To your point, maybe it's way out on the end of a feeder. And it doesn't necessarily make sense to augment that entire feeder to provide a resilient node at the end where maybe you want to put some kind of charging station for an electric vehicle hub. Makes much more sense potentially to provide that with localized power generation. You can dial the needs in right at that spot and not worry about replacing all of the miles and miles of distribution system in between and asking ratepayers to take on the burden of that incremental infrastructure. Certainly, there will be lots of applications where it does make sense to augment and build upon our existing grid. These two things will happen at the same time.
Excellent. Great. Good. Well, thank you very much, Mark and Juan. Very interesting interview. Appreciate it.
Thank you.